Today we'll talk about the leather and beer production technologies in Mesopotamia. And when we look at the details of the sonuna gelmişiz. When we look at the details of the technologies, they are similar to the technologies that we use. When they produced beer, it's very similar to the beer that we produce. Also the leather tanning. There are some details which is slightly different, but basically the principle is the same. Now, the start of production of beer in Mesopotamia started by farming. Mesopotamians were the first civilization who invented plow, saban, kara saban. So we see here a cylinder seal, and you can see the plow here, and the animal. He's farming and one of the first grains they grew was barley, arpa. I will talk about cylinder seals, how they work. It's a small cylindrical stone on which they carve the name of the king or the important person, or they just put a picture rather than writing. Before writing was invented, they were just drawing pictures. Oh, so this is the cylinder on the left-hand side. This is a cylinder which you just put it on clay and just rotate it on the clay, so image is transferred to the clay. And then, of course, you dry it and then bake it. So you give it to the person, so you guarantee that you signed some kind of agreement. Here we see a clay tablet about the amount of barley given to adults and children monthly. So in those days, the kings or the administrators distributed barley to the people according to the number of persons in the family. Because barley was very valuable, because they used barley to make bread. Even today, I don't know, have you ever seen or eaten? Var mı içimizde arpa ekmeği yemiş olan, görmüş olan? Barley bread. In those days, barley was the main source of bread. Here we see another cylinder seal, which depicts the flow. And also they pictured some grains. As I mentioned, this is a better picture of a cylinder seal. As I said, it's stone. These pictures are carved on it. When you just roll it on the clay, you get the image. Now, here we see a clay tablet which gives how much salary or daily payment is to be given to the farmers, to the workers actually, how much beer will be given to the workers. In Egypt and in Mesopotamia, they gave beer to the workers because they drank beer all day long, just like water. In later times, we see that wine was very popular in Europe. As I mentioned before, I think it's because they couldn't trust the water on the tap or on the rivers or on the lakes because they were getting sick. So they were preferring to mix water with wine. And in those days, they were drinking beer all day long. But of course, the percentage of alcohol was much lower than the percentage of alcohol in the beer today. Today we have about 5%, sometimes 6-7%. alcohol, but in those days it was much less. So there is a document which shows us that workers received their salary as beer. Now we see that the Sumerians drink beer not like us with the glass, because there was some sediment in the bottom of the beer. They did not want to drink the sediment, so they were using just straws made out of reed straws, kamış. So they were drinking the beer from the container with the straws. They didn't filter the beer, because in those days they filtered the big impurities, but they didn't have enough material to remove the very fine sediments in the beer. Because after fermentation, you always obtain some sediments in the beer and also in the wine, because of the presence of the yeast. The side reactions produce some sediments. Now here, another cylinder seal which shows that they drink beer from containers with straws. Now this is a banquet, ziyafet, where they drink beer, enjoy and sing and play instruments, music, in the presence of music. Here, this is an important container. There was a famous Queen Puabi, around 2600 BC. This container is for the beer. There is a gold straw and silver container. These are different containers. So it was found, or they were found in the grave of Queen. So we know definitely that the Queen was using this container and the other materials for drinking or sipping beer. The straw was made out of gold, but the container was made out of silver. Now, in the grave of Queen Puabi, they also found this headgear decorated with gold and perhaps silver, and these are the necklaces of the queen. So we understand that the queen was quite a rich person, and she had some attendants, some ushaks, and this cylinder seal, or this, it depicts that she is sitting on her crown or on a chair, and the attendants are serving her food or drinks. In Sumerian clay tablets, whenever we see somebody sitting on a chair, if the person sitting on the chair is much bigger than, depicted much taller than the people around it, either the person is king or queen, or just the opposite. If there is a big person sitting, usually a man, sitting on a chair, and there are several shorter people standing up, and we know that the person who is standing up is the king, so the other one sitting on the chair is God. So they had many gods. So they depict, or they carve the picture of God as a bigger person or bigger silhouette, sitting on a chair or taht or crown. The kings only stand up in front of God. I think we have seen the carving of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was standing up, and the god was sitting on the chair and giving him the laws. You remember that? Okay. So Egyptians and Sumerians were parallel in the use of certain technologies or development of certain technologies. Again, around 3000 BC, they excavated a ruin, and they found a center where Egyptians grew beer. Also, Egyptians used to drink beer all day long, just instead of water, of course. Now, here we have a clay tablet which explains the production of beer, the process. And as I said, Sumerians had many gods. This god is Ninkashi. He is the beer god. And this is a hymn ilahi, hymn dedicated to the beer king, Ninkashi, around 1800 BC. Now, today, as you know, the factories use barley to produce beer. Do you know the first step? Do they just dry the barley or directly ferment it, or they do something else? Does anyone know anything about production of beer today? Very similar to Sumerians. There's an important step.
I believe they first roast it.
Yes, but before roasting, there's another important step. Yeah, you roast it and then you just powderize it and then ferment it. But just before that.
You mean peeling? You mean like peeling the...
No. You wet it and let it stand for a while to germinate, filizlenmek. So always you have to leave barley to germinate. If you don't see the small little things coming out, like very small bug or something, then it will, of course, grow to a green leaf. They stop it at there and then they roast it. So today they do the same. So Sumerian technology is still used to produce beer. Same. Okay. So in this hymn or ilahi, it is explained how they produce beer, first germinating and then fermenting it. Now, I may have mentioned that beer was being produced at home by women because women made the bread every day or every 2 days they made barley bread. So they were always in the kitchen and playing with barley because barley bread was the main course of food. Even today, poor people, they eat just bread and maybe small portion of cheese or something because they cannot find proper food. So in those days also, bread was the main course for lunch, breakfast, and dinner. So women always kept baking bread. And so she knew the properties of dough, hamur, of barley, and also the bread. Therefore, probably, women may have discovered that if you left some roasted, germinated barley and some bread together, they ferment. You know boza, you all know boza. I guess they still sell it. Also, they use bulgur and also some bread. I don't know, do your mothers ever make boza at home? In the old days, usually women made boza maybe 20, 30, 50 years ago at home. So they use just regular bread, dried bread, and some bulgur. Okay, so they fermented and they introduced to the family every day. Therefore, after a while, when the cities grew and strangers come and then traveling became popular because workers moved between cities and then the people who sold something, they moved around. So they had to stop and eat something somewhere. So the first restaurants were opened by housewives, and they served the bread and beer, maybe some other food. So the first pubs or beer houses were run by women. Much later, the men took over the beer selling from the women. As I mentioned before, they germinate the barley, and then they use the bread, which they call bappir, that is twice baked. Probably they baked it twice to make it dry or something. Maybe it would be easier to powderize. It's called bapir. So they mixed them and then made the beer. Now here we see another clay tablet, which is the sales receipt of buying high quality beer. Of course, even today, the prices and the quality of beer changes. So in those days, the same. Some women made or some men made much better tasting beer. The other ones were not so popular. So this receipt about the sales of high quality beer around 2050 BC. Now, let's move to another technology, leather tanning. Does anyone know anything how they tan the leather today or in the past? Any idea? Vardır bir şeyler. Okay, what's the first step? I'm sure you know what's the first step after you flay the hide from the animal. Kurban kesildikten sonra ne yapıyorlar? Deriyi, postu. Yeah, they salt it. Why do they salt it? The first step is to salt it, huh?
Remove the water.
Yeah. Why do you want to remove the water?
Preserve it.
Yeah, to preserve it. If you don't preserve it with salt always remove the excess water from any meat or anything, then you prevent the rotting or decomposition of the hide. Otherwise, the bacteria quickly rots the hide. So first step is salting. But then, do you know anything else? What do they do to convert it to leather? We have hide, which is salted and dried. There are some steps. But if you don't know, maybe you can make an estimation, make a guess. Tanning. The name is in English tanning. Does tan, the word tan, reminds you the name of any chemical, any compound? Tanning. Did you hear the word tannin? Tannin? Did you hear or you did not? No answer. You never heard the word tannin? It's an organic compound. It is necessary to tan because the word of tanning comes from tannin, see? And tannin is present in various plants and some barks of some trees and some plants. Tannin is important. Okay, we'll see the details, but so the first step is to salt it and dry it, and then it goes to tanning house. Then they carry out the process. We will see the details. So as we said, it's a process which converts the flayed, wet hide into leather that we use today, or it's been used for thousands of years. So when we use the chemical tannin, or there are some other compounds, some organic, some inorganic compounds, which stabilizes the structure of hide. And that is those compounds form cross links between the protein molecules. But when we talk about proteins, we are talking about collagen. Do you know what collagen is? Collagen? Biyokimya dersi almadık mı hiç? Collagen? Collagen is present in our body, in almost every part of our body, including our bones. If we didn't have collagen, I couldn't stand up here because do you know the composition of bone in our bodies? Composition of what is composed of? Ya o kadar sessiz durmayın, bir şeyler söyleyin.
Kalsiyum.
Calcium, of course, yeah. Calcium what?
Kalsiyum sulfat mı?
No. Something similar, sounds similar, but
Karbon.
no, not calcium carbonate. Calcium phosphate. Phosphate, yeah. Because you have to have phosphor all the time, phosphorus all the time. So you have calcium phosphate. Is it a very strong material or it's brittle? It's just a compound, just a powder, right? Okay, if my bones are made out of calcium phosphate, how can I stand up?
I believe calcium phosphate is brittle and collagen
Yeah.
makes it flexible.
If you have a powder or brittle material, and then if you have another flexible material, we use it everywhere in the world, this technology. What is that mixture? One compound is soft, the other one is brittle. If you put together, it becomes the strongest, one of the strongest things in the world. You don't know anything about composites? But what's the meaning of composite compounds? Composite materials, sorry. Duydunuz mu, duymadınız mı hiç composite? Okay, make an estimate, make a guess. Composites. As I said, some soft material and flexible material, some flexible and hard material together. Everywhere, you in this room, you see it all around us.
Actually, PVC may be the example of this.
PVC is a plastic.
I think it's a brittle thing, but we add some.
Yeah, we had some plasticizers to make it more flexible. But what else? What else we have in this room? What's the main structure of this room made out of? Huh?
Beton.
Beton. Okay. What do you use in concrete?
Çimentoyla şey karıştırıyor.
Bak şimdi bir şey karıştırıyor. Çimento kum, something else. Come on. Böyle tahta kalıplar oluyor. Then what? Do they pour the cement directly or?
There must be iron.
Yeah. You need iron, steel. Without steel, it just sets, dries, becomes hard, but it's brittle. So it's a composite. Iron is flexible, or steel is flexible, and concrete is strong, but it's brittle. When they get together, it becomes a concrete. Okay?
O zaman kimyasal bir reaksiyon olmasına gerek yok herhalde.
Bir bakıma olabilir, olmayabilir. O kadar mühim değil. Mühim olan kompozitte iki maddenin birbirine eksik olan özelliğini tamamlaması.
Ben biraz daha böyle koloid veya süspansiyon gibi bir şey hayal ediyorum.
Yo değil. No.
İçindeki birkaç demir çubuk da onu kompozit yapmak.
Ama sertleşmesi gerekir ama sertleşirse olur. Okay, there are many other types. We just talked about the simplest one. There is another one. You talked about plastics. How about polymers? How about composites made out of polymers? You don't watch TV? There are many documentaries talking about composites, and you use it every day. We see it everywhere around us. The plastic plus something else. Polymers plus something else.
Can we give the example of the vulcanization for elasticity?
No, when you vulcanize, you change its physical properties. It's not a composite. You change the chemical structure of the polymer. It becomes stronger, harder. But composite, you need at least two different materials. One sets, the other one is flexible. Did you hear the word fiberglass? Okay, what's fiberglass? Fiberglass boats, fiberglass aeroplanes. Many parts of aeroplanes are made out of fiberglass, but now they use something else. We used to use just small fibers of glass because you can have something like a textile from fibers of glass. And then you use polyester, then you have the fiberglass material. But these days we don't use glass anymore. Of course we use glass, but for high technology we use another fiber. What fiber do we use? Carbon fiber. So when you make aeroplane parts or spacecrafts, you use carbon fiber and polyester or epoxide. You can use epoxide or polyester. Now, these days, high technology uses epoxide plus carbon fiber. It's much lighter and as strong as steel. Okay. So, when we talk about tanning the leather, we use leather everywhere. And Sumerians also used leather everywhere because they had to eat the meat of the cow or sheep, and then they discovered that they could make use of the hide, and they used everywhere in their houses, workshops, etc. So they made shoes, clothes, tents, whatever. So the tanning, of course, or using of hide, I shouldn't say tanning, but primitive tanning or use of hide goes back to a primitive man, caveman. Usually we don't use the word caveman anymore, but let's say primitive man or caveman, because they had to hunt and eat the meat of the animal, and then they had hide left, and they discovered that that hide protects them from the cold weather, from the snow, from rain, whatever. So they started to use the hide of the animal because they knew that animal was protected by the hide. But of course, after a while, it just decomposed, deteriorated, and stinks. It stinks very bad because of bacteria production. And they discovered that they could prolong the lifetime of hides. But of course, the primitive man couldn't tan the leather like Sumerians or today as we do. But they at least found a way to prolong the lifetime of the hide. The first written document telling us the technology of tanning is from the Sumerians. Before that, we don't see any written documents because they didn't know how to read and write. Alphabet was not invented yet. Now, as I mentioned, you have to cross-link the collagen molecules or collagen fibers to make it strong. Just like, as I said, our bones, we have the calcium phosphate and the collagen, so our bones are partly flexible, they don't break very easily, and we can stand up. Otherwise, we would be on the ground just like other like maybe a kurba or something. Okay, anyway, so the chemical structure of collagen by cross-linking changes. Therefore, the hide becomes leather, and you can increase the lifetime almost indefinitely. Of course, after maybe thousands of years, they deteriorate perhaps, but it lasts much longer than your lifetime. So the chemical structure is totally changed by cross-linking. Like you mentioned, rubber. You have soft rubber from the trees. It's like a suckers, chewing gum. But when you cross-link, it becomes hard, strong. You can use in the tires of your cars, everywhere. You can even make it much harder by cross-linking. So cross-linking is the main process in tanning of collagen, proteins. Collagen is protein, but the physical structure is not as we expect. Now, as I mentioned, the primitive man used fresh leather, maybe 1 week or 10 days, no more than that. But they accidentally discovered that smoke, wood smoke, prolonged the lifetime of leather. we don't know if they discovered salting before or after, but we know that they produced leather by use of smoke. If you lived in a cave, the first thing they did was to burn wood just in the entrance of the cave. Why? The fire keeps the wild animals away. Wild animals cannot enter the cave because of the fire. They are all afraid of the fire. So they were protected by the fire. And of course, some of the smoke came into the cave. So when they had some hide, sometimes they used fresh hide as a door in the cave. Probably that is something that helped them to discover that smoke makes fresh hide more durable. So smoke is a kind of tanning. So in primitive tanning, or even today, some people, I'll show you some videos, they tan, they complete the tanning of leather by smoke. Why? Because the fresh leaves and branches of wood contains or produces formaldehyde when you burn it. So formaldehyde is a good cross-linking agent. Therefore, that's why we say that smoke tans leather and turns it into hide. Of course, it's not as durable as modern tanning, but still, it prolongs the lifetime much longer than just leaving it fresh or drying. And formaldehyde was not only used by cavemen. For centuries, it was used for tanning because it's a good cross-linking agent. But later on, they banned it because formaldehyde is harmful for the workers. Now, of course, cavemen knew that salt was important for them because every single cell in our body needs salt. In every single cell, we had some salt. So if you lose some salt, you try to find something to make sure that your body gets enough salt. So salt was always used by primitive man. Whenever they found a rock usually it was in the form of rock salt. Therefore, they had salt in their caves. It was very valuable. I don't know, I mentioned that salt was so valuable that it was used instead of money. Did I mention that? Yeah. So because it's one of the most essential things that for your life that you need. So they noticed that if you salt, as you mentioned, if you salt the hide, it sucks up the water, and then hide is dried. So dry hide lasts much longer than fresh hide because for bacteria to grow, they need water. When you have a dry leather, bacteria cannot grow. Of course, there is some water, maybe 10%, 12%, but it's much less than the fresh hide. So you prolong the lifetime. Therefore, they knew that you could prolong the lifetime by salting or by smoke. But of course, in both cases, it was not tanned properly because there is no cross-linking. So neither salt or smoke is sufficient enough to produce enough cross-linking. Salt doesn't create any cross-linking, but smoke partially creates some cross-linking, but it's not enough. The amount is not enough. So as time passed, Sumerians were the first civilization, as far as we know, to use tannin-containing plants. So these tannin molecules, I think I have the, I think I have the molecule, structure of the molecule of the tannin. Now, when we look at the clay tablets of Sumerians, there are many words we see related to tannin. because tanning was one of the most important they didn't have too many technologies. So tanning was the most important technology, close to perhaps metallurgy. So we see the word tanner, the man who tans the leather, or hide, I'm sorry. It's called askap in Sumerian language and askapu in Akkadian language. Now, in city of Ur, 1 out of 8 shops was a tanning workshop. So it was so popular. Everybody wanted to have a tanning shop. 1 out of 8 of every shop was tanning shop around 2000 BC. Now, of course, the number of tanning shops increased in cities, and then, as you know, it stinks. In all processes, it stinks. And people began to complain, and the kings or the mayors of the cities asked the tanning shops to move out of the cities. It happened in Istanbul. Do you remember that story in Istanbul? Dalan'ın zamanındaydı galiba. Do you remember the mayor of Istanbul, Dalan? No? Many years ago, when he was the mayor of Istanbul, he moved out all the tanning factories. I think they were around Galata. Anybody from Istanbul? Okay. I think it was in Galata by Haliç. So Haliç was the dirtiest sea in the world, perhaps, because they dumped all their chemicals into Haliç. And Dalan used to say, I will clean Haliç, and the color of the sea in Haliç will look like my eyes. He had blue eyes. And he did it, actually. He moved out all the tanners out. And then, of course, that area was the worst area in Istanbul, and the land and the houses were cheap. Only the very poor people lived there. But after that, of course, it became a very valuable area for living and making houses. Okay, so Dalan maybe did the same thing several thousand years after the Sumerians. Now, we see that in the clay tablets they mention a person who makes fur, kürk. It's called kusiga. So tanner is something else, but fur producers have a different name, kürkçü. Now, in tanning houses, most of the people were slaves and also some blind people. This is written in the clay tablets. When they mention the workers, they mention so many blind men is doing his job or whatever. So they made boats, door hinges, and bags for drinking water, pouches, and also pouches for butter or salt, stylus cases, and covers for amulets, muska, amulet. Amulet comes from, muska comes from Sumerians also. Same, triangular shaped. Helmets for the warriors, soldiers, shields for the soldiers, queers, that is the oksada, and also one of the most important is the sound skin of drums, because drums were always popular throughout the history. Because armies used it, people used it for enjoyment, whatever. Drum was always there because they produced hide. So drum was invented after hide, but previously they had perhaps some wood which is inside was emptied and you hit it. There was drum, but the drum that we know today was invented after the discovery of tanning. Shoes, sandals, everything, just like we use today. But an interesting carving we see here in Mesopotamia, you can see that these are soldiers. This is the hide which is filled with air. You see the man is breathing the air in the hide, the bag, air bag, and he's under the water. You can see with the fishes, because these soldiers, there are several of them, are going to attack a castle, and that's how they won the war. because the people in the castle did not expect anybody to come from the water. If they came with a ship, they could, attack. But they didn't expect anybody would come from under the sea. İlk dalgıçlar onlarmış yani. Biz çok sonradan oldu sanıyoruz ama. Okay. Now let's look at the tanning steps of Sumerians. It's very similar to the steps that we use today. As you mentioned, salting was the first step to protect the hides, because you received many hides, especially in Kurban Bayramı. You cannot tan them all in one day, so you have to stock them. So that's why they asked the families to salt the hide before they send it to Türk Hava Kurumu, but now I think Türk Hava Kurumu doesn't have authority to collect them. They used to take it to factories. So in the factories, they put them in a big house, and then they tan it. Maybe it takes 3, 4, 5 months to tan them all, because you cannot do it in one day. Therefore, salting was the first step, and just like today, they used to stock them. For, let's say, some people had 5 or 6 hides. They salted it and then bring to the tanning house, and then they kept them in a stock room. Then they started to hide. Now, of course, you had to flay the hide first, flaying, the first step, and then salting. And this step is called curing. Today is also called curing. Salting is called curing. Then they soak the hides, salted hides, into a pit, büyük bir çukur, which is filled with water. And the pit they called agar, not agar agar we know today, but I don't know, maybe the word comes from there, possibly, I don't know. Because you can observe the formation of lots of gelatin, collagen. When you heat collagen, it turns into gelatin. So anytime you make strawberry jelly or different kinds of jelly, you buy from the market, or your mother makes jelly for you, it is from the bones of the animals. So they buy the bones from the slaughtering houses, mezbaha, and then they boil it and then purify it, and that's how you get your gelatin. So after that step, after you immerse the salted hide into water in pits, that's called soaking. It washed the unwanted things, and salt also, dirt, some of the dust, other dirt, and salt is removed in the pit. Now, they used urine, human urine or animal urine, didn't matter, to remove the hair from the hide, but more importantly, to remove the fat and oil from the hide. Because urine contains ammonia, in a way. The product is ammonia, so it's basic. When it reacts with water, you get ammonium hydroxide. It's a good base. And it attacks, the bases attack oil or fat. That's how we produce soap, right? We take fat or oil and put some potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide, and with potassium hydroxide, soft liquid soap. With sodium hydroxide, we produce hard soap, right? We'll talk about it later on. So all the grease, fat was clean, and all the dirt was gone in the urine. And also, it loosened the fibers in the hide. Bases loosen the hair or fibers on the leather, on the hide, sorry. the other advantage of putting into pit, into water solution, was to start some kind of putrefaction, deterioration. Because if the hide starts to putrefy or decompose slightly, then you can remove the hair more easily. Of course, you don't let it rotten totally. So it was a controlled rottening or putrefaction, and using urine afterwards made sure that you could remove all the hair. And this step, as you can estimate, is depilation, just like the word that we use in our daily life today, depilation. When they took out the hides from the pit, water pit, and then applied some urine, then when they were sure that the hair or fibers were loose, then they used a blunt knife or wooden knife. They scraped it very easily. You can easily scrape with a piece of wood. So when you remove hide, at the same time, there is some fat under the hair or fibers. That's also gone. And also some of the unwanted organic compounds, they are all gone. Some flesh. Bazen orada kanman da olabiliyor duruma göre. Now, an important process that's called betting. In betting, they used animal dung, hayvan gübresi. And I will explain what it is, why they do it. But after a while, they started to use dog manure, köpek dışkısı, and it had to be fresh. And there is a Turkish saying, do you remember? Dabakhaneye çıt çıt mı yetiştiriyorsun? Because when you run fast, the children collected fresh dog manure from the streets and then started to run to the factory before it dried. So when you saw children running to the tanning factories, that would mean that they had some dog manure in their hand. That's how the atasözü comes from there. Now, why fresh dog manure is more effective than dung? Because dung usually was dry, but dog manure had more enzymes, which you needed for betting process. It had more enzymes. They needed that enzyme to produce high quality leather. Now, dog manure was used during Ottoman and maybe during the beginning of Republic in Turkey and all over the world. Because it was cheap and almost for free, because children, you had to pay just a few kuruşes to the children. It was almost free. So they didn't want to buy chemicals. They used it for many, many years. Now, you said that the main material in the hide is collagen, protein. But, of course, in the hide, there are some other proteins that we do not want in our hide. We only want collagen, which is cross-linked. So you have to remove those proteins, otherwise they create some problems. They may reduce the lifetime of the hide in the end. In order to get rid of these unwanted small proteins, you needed these enzymes. So the enzymes from the dog manure or the dung of the animals was very useful because they contained the necessary enzymes to remove all that unwanted proteins, and you are left almost with 100% collagen. So therefore, the leather reached to a very high quality. It's much softer and more durable. Now, first you flayed the animal, you salted it, and then you immerse it into a pit to get rid of the hair with urine in a basic solution. And then you removed all the hair and you got rid of all the unwanted proteins. Now you have to carry out a chemical process which will prolong the lifetime of your leather for many, many years, maybe centuries. That is what you need is cross-linking of the collagen. So the last step is tanning. You can use some vegetable tanning agents, we say, from the plants or trees, or you can use some minerals. We'll talk about some of the minerals. They are also good tanning agent. They also form cross-linking. Now, they used some, did I mention tanning? Okay, they used some plants or vegetables which contain tannin, and they also used alum as a tanning agent because alum also creates cross-linking between the protein molecules or collagen in collagen. Now, in these days, they use chrome alum. For centuries, they use regular alum, but now chrome alum seems to be more efficient and makes the leather more durable. Sometimes you see some kind of colored leather in some factories. That's because of the presence of chromium, potassium chrome sulfate. Now, I said that the first written documents about tanning was produced by Sumerians. Of course, we see some documents from Egypt, and after Sumerians, maybe Akkadian or Babylonians, whatever. But the first written documents, as far as we know today, is from Sumerians. And one of these documents, written by Kiminai, the name of the man was Kiminai, and the document says, 6 shekels of alum, mina gallnuts, 1/3, quarter of fat, 1/3 mina, and 2 shekels of mir. Mir, in Turkish we call mür. Hiç gördünüz mü öyle bir koku, duydunuz mu? Aktarlarda varmış, ben hiç bilmiyorum. Var mı bilen? Ha? Mür. It gives a good odor to leather, and also it's used.
Zeytinli olarak satılıyor.
Mür mü? Mürlü zeytinyağı mı? Ben hiç görmedim. Yani müre zeytinyağı mı kat?
Yok, bir reçine olarak satılıyor. Güzel kokuyor.
İşte içine mür katmışlardır ya, zeytinyağı zeytinden çıkıyor. Güzel koksun diye demek hiç duymamıştım. Okay. Duyan var mı başka? Mürlü zeytinyağı.
Mürlü benim mumum var böyle. Çok çok güzel kokuyor. Güzel.
Evet, yani Osmanlı'da falan kullanılan bir şeydi. In Egypt, there abundance of myrrh. Also in Mesopotamia. I don't know if we have in Turkey. I don't know. I have no idea. Okay. So 2 shekels of myrrh for tanning. 11th day of Ayru. See, gives the date because they keep records and they give the date. 11th day of Ayru, the month. To Kininai, the leather worker, has been delivered. So the merchant, this is the document of the merchant on a clay tablet saying that I presented these materials to tanners so that he can use for tanning. Galnuts is palamut, bir çeşit palamut. Fat, also you need fat because you need some fat or oil to soften the leather further. Not too much, but little bit is necessary to make it soft leather. And also when you make fur, kürk, you have to use lots of oil to make it so soft. So when we say mina and shekel, we'll talk about it later on. Mina and shekel are the weight measures. 60 shekel is equal to 1 mina. 60 mina is equal to 1 talent. We'll talk about it later on. So we see alum, it's a mineral tanning agent, and also gallnut, meşe palamudu. They are both have the property of tanning because alum creates cross-linking of, and then also gallnut also cross-links tannin. So we see that this man used organic and inorganic tanning agents. So he knew that probably it was much better, I don't know, but to use both. So from here we can understand that these materials were the basic ingredients for tanning. There are several other clay tablets like this one, which lists the chemicals or compounds used by tanners. Now we talked about the sound skin of drum. Davul derisi diyoruz herhalde. Davul derisi. Now it says you take this hide and steep it in pulverized flour. Flour was also used for tanning. Barley flour or other grains, of other flour of the other grains. There are several of them they used. And pulverized flour of pure wheat, they always say pure. Yeah, that means high quality probably, high quality. Yoksa buğdayın safı nasıl olacak? In an aqueous mixture of fine wine. Why would he use wine? Wine contains a compound, a chemical, which also helps cross-linking. Can you guess what? Not alcohol. How do we produce wine? From which fruit? Nereden yap? Üzüm. Okay. When you eat üzüm, you feel kind of a strange taste. What do you think that causes that taste? It's not only pure sweet, but after a while you taste something else. Tannin. Tannin ne oldu?
Çok salladım da.
Salladım diyorsun da yıllar önce ben Ankara Üniversitesi'ne gitmiştim 85 yılında çünkü burada profesör olmamız yasaktı yani YÖK çıktı. Bizi yasakladı profesör olmak için. İşte bana da dediler ki Ankara Üniversitesi'ne gelir misin? Gittim her neyse. Orada sınav yapıyorum. Memur, rektör yardımcısı işte dekanlık falan bir şeyler yaptım orada. Sınav yapıyoruz. Memur sınavı. 3 şehirde Kırıkkale, Kastamonu, Çankırı ve Ankara. Aynı anda 7.000 kişiye sınav yapıyoruz. Bana dediler sınavı sen yapacaksın. İşte bir ekip topladık. Allah'tan rahat yaptık. Neyse mülakatlara gidiyoruz. Bir şeyler nereden mezunsun dedim. Ben dedi inşaat teknik okulundan 2 yıllık. Ha dedim ne güzel. Bir şeyler sordum. Çocuk hiçbir şey bilmiyor. Dedim ya nasıl peki 1 metrekare ne kadar yani o kadar uzun geçti en son 1 metrekareye kadar geldim. Dedim ki 1 metrekare nasıl ya bir elinle göster ya bu oda kadar mı şu kadar mı bu kadar mı? Duruyor çocuk. Ya de insaf ya at dedim. Atacak da tutturamayacak dedi. Onun için atmak bazen tutturuyorsun bazen tutturamıyorsun. Okay. It says you take this hide and steep it in pulverized flour of pure wheat in an aqueous mixture of fine wine. Then rub it with fine fat of pure bullock, alum of the Hittite country, and gallnuts. Then you will spread it over the brass kettle drum. So he used organic and inorganic tanners, and then he produced the drum, the leather for the brass drum. We have another tablet. All of these give us an idea how they did it. You will take the hide of this bullock and in pulverized flour of pure wheat, in aqueous mixture with the best beer, bu defa bira kullanıyor, and in wine. You will steep it in the fat of pure bullock and extracts of aromatic plants, mür kastediyor herhalde, 4 quarters of malt flour, arpa unu, 4 quarters of bitku, we don't know what that grain was. 1/4 of satru flour, we don't know what it is also. You will steep it. You will rub it with gallnuts and alum of Hittite country. So we see that gallnuts were exported from Anatolia, from Hittites. We have another tablet. It says, you will steep the skin of a young goat with milk of a yellow goat and with flour. You grease with the fine oil and fat of pure cow. Tabi pure cow ne demek anlamak da zor yani. Amacı herhalde iyi kalite olsun. Hani kötü kalite olsa ne olacak bilmiyoruz ama bizim iş zor demek istiyor esasında. Böyle her şeyin iyisi olacak. İşte tabi sen de pure cow'un şeyin feti nereden bulacağını bilmiyorsan biraz bilgi veriyorlar ama hafif de böyle işi zora koşuyorlar. Hepsinde öyle zaten. You grease with fine oil and fat of pure cow. You will soak the alum in grape juice and cover the surface of the skin with gallnuts of arbitro cultivators, ormancı, of the Hittite country. So gallnuts, again, here they mentioned that come from Anatolia. Now, we talked about salting and then tanning with organic or inorganic cross-linking agents. And we also mentioned that they use some oil to make it soft. But they also discovered that some hide they could tan by using oil. Because when you use oil and you rub the hide, dry hide, with the oil, of course, even though it's dry, there are some water molecules. So hide moves into the structure of the hide, and then it replaces water. So if you replace water with oil, you can prolong the lifetime. If you remove the water alone, it can be decomposed after a while. But when you have oil instead of water, that prolongs the lifetime. So oil tanning. So that's how they manufacture fur with this method. So when most of the water is replaced by oil or fat, the leather becomes soft and durable. And we say that modern manufacturers, even today, rub hides with oxidizable oil, not ordinary oil, but they discovered that oxidizable oil is much better. And then they produce fur and chalamus, güderi. Now this is the structure, the picture of the myrrh plant or myrrh plant. They obtain the resin and use it as a perfume ingredient. Or, as you said, they add it to certain things to just give good odor like mum or anything.
Hocam